Hello Netcode-Hub channel viewers, welcome back to another exciting tutorial. Today we are diving into a crucial aspect of developing robust and reliable web APIs, and that is unit testing controllers. We will be using three powerful tools to achieve this, that is Fake It Easy, Fluent Assertion, and XUnit framework. Whether you are a seasoned developer or just getting started, this tutorial will equip you with the skills to write clean, efficient, and maintainable unit tests for your web API controllers. So let's get started and make testing fun and effective. First of all, let's understand what unit testing is and some of its importance. Unit testing, it is a software testing technique where individual components or units of a software are tested in isolation from the rest of the application. So the primary goal of doing this is to validate that each unit of the software performs as expected. This helps in identifying bugs or issues early in the development cycle, making the software more robust and reducing the cost and effort required for later stages of testing. Now, for the benefit of using unit testing, it helps you to identify bugs early in the development process. It also ensures that each unit of work or each unit works correctly before integrating them into the larger system. It also serves as a documentation for the code, and it explains how each unit is expected to behave. So anytime that you're done creating your application, you have to test it. Okay, now let's see. This video is going to be into, I think, 3 or more sections. Yeah, well, 3 sections. Now we're going to first talk about how to unit test controllers, how to unit test our repositories, and how to unit test our services. But for now, this video is geared towards testing controllers. Now, what are we going to do today? We're going to create a solution. We're going to add the XUnit framework as a project. We're going to add a web API. In that, you're going to connect our API to database, and that is specifically for SQLite. Aside from that, we're going to create a repository which has our interface and our implementation. Aside from that, we do our registrations and a whole lot. Then we create our controller. We inject our repository in there as an interface so we can perform CRUD. Aside from that, when we see that our CRUD is working in an API, then we go back to the unit testing, and we're going to create a unit test to test each of the CRUD endpoint. So you're going to have all the CRUD, and we're going to test each CRUD and see whether it is giving us what is expected to give us. And that is what we're going to do today. Alright, so I have a Visual Studio Launch in here. Make sure you have also yours launched, as you can see. The next thing that we're going to do here is I have created just a blank solution. So you can create blank solution. The reason why I made this is I want to organize all the projects under one solution. So I have this container, and in there I'm going to add 2 projects. The first project is going to be the web API. The second one is going to be the unit text. So let's have a look on how to do that. So right click on the solution. Now let's add a new project in here. And now this project is going to be the web API. And with this, maybe I can give it a name at all. Let's say this is API. Well, very simple name. This API. Aside from that, let's click on create because you want to maintain everything in the default mode. Click on create. Once you're done, we're going to add the next project, and that's the XUnit framework. We're going to add as a project to this. Let's see. Let's wait for this to get the project created, and now we create the XUnit as well. Yep, so this is ready. Now let's add the testing framework as a project. So right click on solution, then go to add, now new project. And the new project, what are you going to do? You can just click on this to limit it to testing. And in there we need the XUnit. So we need this XUnit test project. So make sure you click this for C#. So click this and then give it as test. So let's make it as just test. Okay. So we have this here. We add this. So in our solution we have 2 projects: our web API and our the unit testing. Yeah, so we have it in here. That is the default one, so we can go ahead and get rid of the default one, so we can see it in here. Good. So we have this. So let's first work on the API, and for the API we're going to install some packages. And as you know, if you want to connect to SQLite, there's some packages that you want to do, or you want to install them, and some stuff that you need to configure, isn't it? Great, so let's do that. Quickly, you go to dependencies and manage NuGet packages, and you need to install the EF core tools and the SQLite. So we need to also install. We have the EF core. Let's see, do you have the SQL? We have two, so let's install this tool. Then we have last package, and that is going to be the SQLite. If you want to install SQL Server, you can go ahead and undo it in here. So let's search for SQLite and install it. Okay, so we have it in here. Now what we're going to do here is we have the packages also installed in the packages section. So you can see we have these packages in here. Now the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to create a model, and maybe let's have a model, user model. Well, you can just change it to any model at all that you want. But for now, I'm going to just add a folder to this, and this is going to be models. Now in our model, I want to add just user model. We're going to have 3 properties in here. This is for testing purpose. So we are not much concerned with the validation and a whole lot. You're not much concerned with that. What you want to do here is you want to, at the end, you want to integrate this and now check it in our testing. Okay, so now that we have this, let's go to the same project. Let's add a new folder, and I'm going to name this as data. Aside from that, I'm going to add a new class, and that's going to be the appdb context or user context. Well, maybe I think user context will be okay. So this has to inherit from db context, and this is coming from EF core. So we need to create constructor and then create a db set, which is going to be for our table, and that's what we are doing in here. Aside from that, what we're going to do here is we need to register this in the program.cs file so we can perform database migration. So we can simply go to our program.cs file, and then before the app build, we want to add database context, and we have a db context class injected in here. We're using an SQLite, and this is our connection. So connection string, maybe we can decide not to use connection string in here, because this, let's make it straightforward. So in order to make it straightforward, just pass in data source, and now we are saying this is unit test db.db. Okay, so this is a database. Let's save that. So now that we are done with this, we can build this and perform migration. Let's rebuild the API section. That is ready. So now we can go ahead and now perform migration. So add migration. I'll give it a name. You can change this. You make sure you have a default project as API. After this is done, we're going to update the database. So update database. Yeah, so we have a database created, and now the database itself has been attached to our project. Now that we are done with this, we can go ahead and create a repo. So let me just add folder in here. Maybe I can say repository. Now with this repo, let me just add the interface and the implementation here straight away. So we go our way as well. So in here we have an interface, and I'm going to create it as iUser interface. So as I have this iUser interface, there are some methods or interfaces that I want to add because you want to perform CRUD. So that is a create, read, update, and delete. So we have our CRUD, create, update, delete, get by ID, that is read, and now get all. So in order for us to manage it or arrange it well, we have our CRUD, then update, and then delete. Yes, so we have our CRUD in here. Okay, what's the next thing to do? You can see here we are creating it, and now we're passing, there is a payload as a user because we want to create new user, and this is going to return bool. It could be true, could be false. And here get by ID, you want to return an entry of user. Then we specify the ID to make a search in the database. We also want to get all list of users, so that's the reason why we're using this IEnumerable or iCollection. Then we have update, we pass in the model as an object. Then at the end of the day, we want to return was able to get updated. If yes, return true. If no, then you know what you're going to return. Then the same thing applies to delete. We're able to delete it. If yes, that is true. If no, that is false. So now we have this interface created. What's the next thing to do? We need to create our implementation. So let's go to the same repo. And now in the same repo, I'm going to create a class. And I'm going to say this is user. So this is user repo. Is a repository. So I have this, and you know that anytime that you have this, you should inherit from this, right? So iUser interface, and now control period or control dot, you can go for implement interface, implement all the 5 or 6 interfaces that we created. Okay, now let's define the interfaces or the method here. All that you need to do is inject your user DB context. Then let's say this is context. Now for create, what are we doing in here? This is quite simple. So I have a simple method here to work it on for the create. We are creating new user, so this must be an async. As you know, we have an async, and we add it to the table. After that, we save it, and we check the response from the save changes, which returns integer. It is greater than 0. It means everything is set. Return true. If not, you know what to do. Return false. Aside from that, we have our update. Now for update, what are we doing? So let's see. This is our update. And now with the update, we want to get the user from the database. If we do find a user, then update the name and the email. Save it, and I return the same thing. Save changes also returns the ID. You want to return it to the user. You want to check in case it is greater than 0, which should be. Then you want to return true, else we return false. Okay, so the next thing that we're doing here is let's go for the delete in case I want to delete the user. All that you need to do here is to make a search the database, find the user. In case we have it, then we want to delete it. But in case you do not, what are you doing? You want to return not found. This specific user is not found, and that is exactly what we're doing. After that, after you remove it, you have to make sure you save it so you can make this change stick. Okay, good. Now what is the next thing? We have a get method to get all users, and this is quite simple. We can use this lambda expression to handle that, and this must be an async. So get to the database, the table known as the user, convert everything to a list, and now quickly return it. So we can make this to a single line. Yes. Now what is get by ID? This is also simple. Let's make this as a single line as well. So let's remove all this. And now you can see we have here get to the users, use first or default, and now search for the specific ID which is specified. Okay, so you can see that we have the CRUD implemented here nicely and beautifully. Good. Now that we are done with this, what is the next thing that we're supposed to do? We have to register this by creating dependency injection between the interface and the implementation. So go to our program, And now down here, we can say that builder.services.add. You can use scope, our user interface. Then we have our user repository as well. Great. So now that we have this, it tells us that it's ready. Now what we need to do to use this repo here, it is to create a controller. So for controller creation, I have a simple one here for you. Let me just grab it quickly. We go to our controllers folder, and now we're going to paste it in there. Now bear in mind that the namespace here is an API/controllers. So let's go to the controller, user controller that I just pasted, and I'm going to make this as API-controllers. Okay, so that is the namespace that I have added. Now what we are doing here is we need to inject the interface that we created from that repo. Then you can see here we need to also inject our model as a user model. Then simply we're going to call the create async. Now this is going to return true or false. We check if it is true, then return created at action. Call this method, and we specify the ID and then the user object. So, or we want to return bad request. And now from the read all, we're also doing the same thing. You can see we get the whole list. In case it is we have the count is greater than 0, we want to return okay. But in case the count is equal to 0, then you want to return not found. Get single, we do same. We get the ID, and now with this ID, maybe we can specify the ID here too. And now this ID is going to be integer as well. Okay. Now the ID that we have, we get from database. In case it is null, then return not found. But in case it isn't, then we have the user in there. For all of the updates, we call the same method, the same repo method. That is the update async. We pass in the object of update. Then we check it is going to return true or false. That's a boolean, and we check if it's true. Then we're going to return okay. But in case it isn't, then we want to return not found. Then the last one is the delete. We pass in the ID, and in here you will see that we call this delete endpoint. You pass in the ID in there, and in case it is true, it works. Then return no content. But in case it doesn't, then return not found. So that is what we are doing in our controller. So now that we have this, we're going to run this controller and make sure that this is working before we venture our unit testing. So let's run this and check it out. And there you go. So we have our API working. Now let's go in there and I'll try to add user. We have a default one, so we're going to add this. Let's see if it's going to work. Yes, we have 201 that is created, and we have data given to us back. Now let's go and try to get everything from the database. Yes, we have only one. Now if I go for single, specify the ID as 1, click on execute, what do you think will happen? Yes, I believe you are thinking this, and there you go, we have it. Okay, so aside from that, let's go and update it. So I pass in the ID of 1. Now I want to change the name to updated, the email to @mail. Then let's go in for execute this. Well, we have it in here. How do we know it has been updated? We can go for the ID, and now we have it in there. You can see it's updated. And you can, let's add one more and delete that. This is a default one, and that's an ID of 2 automatically. So if I go for 2 in here, or even if I go for all, I have the 2 records, ID 2, let's get this deleted. So if I go to delete, pass in the ID of 2, execute this, we have 204. And aside as no content, and aside from that, if I go for get all, I have only one record. So you see that the controller here, it is working. But the problem is, it is not all the time that you need to run your application using the controller to verify and see each method, each function gives you what is expected. You can use the unit test to do that. So let's have a look on how do we test this controller using unit testing. Now I have the project, or you and I have the project added already, isn't it? Great, so you have it in there. Now what we're going to do here is we need to install our two packages. That is our Fluent Assertion, and we need to install Fake It Easy. You can use mock package, or you can use Fake It Easy to mock service, okay, or to mock repo. Now I'm going to use the Fake It Easy. Let's see. So I can minimize this, go to the test dependencies, right click on it, go to manage NuGet packages, and now in here go to the browse tab, and I'll type in Fluent Assertion, and now let's install this package in here. Aside from that, we're going to install, you can use the mock MOQ, you can use this one, you can use this. Oh, I just type in knock, not mock. So that is MO. You can use this package. Let's wait. Okay, so you can use this mock package, or you can use Fake It Easy. So this is also another one, Fake It Easy. So keep it freaking faking. Yeah, so use this package. You can also install this. So this is what you're going to be using. I'm going to install this package as well. So I have two packages here, Fluent Assertion and now Fake It Easy. Now after we have these packages installed, let's go back to our unit testing project. And then here, let's create what we're going to test for controllers. So I'm going to add folder here for identification and organization purpose. So let me say this is controller. Maybe you can add controller test for naming conventions. I'll leave it up to you. Do what you think it is right for easy identification too. Okay, now when we check here, in order for us to create it, when we check to our controller, we have the controller name as user controller. What method are you going to test? Now, what is the end result? Now, in this controller or in this testing, we want to test. We want to return only success. Even when we are creating, we want to return created. If you are getting data, you want to return okay. You see, if you are returning if you are updating a record, you want to return an okay or success. So we are not returning the negative side. Okay, you want to return the positive side. That is what you're going to use in testing this. But if you want to return a negative side, that's quite simple. All that you do here is specify the action method that you want to return, and boom, you have it. You have a look in here, so don't worry. Now, so let's see, from our create, we use the controller name, the method name, and now we use the return, what you want to return. So here, you want to return created at action. So created. So you're going to be user controller underscore create, that is the method, underscore return created. That's going to be the method name that you're going to create for the test. And this test is particularly for this create action endpoint. Okay, so in our controller, let's see, in this our controllers folder, I'm going to add a class, and now this class is going to be user controller test. So user controller test. Okay, let's make this as public. Now, in order for you to run all the tests that you're going to create in here, you can go for test, then run all tests to make it run. Or you can also run the individual test, and I'll show you when we get there. So the next thing that we need to do here is to set up our dependencies. If I say dependencies, what does this controller need in order for it to work, or this test class needs in order for it to work? We are creating this test against this user controller. Now when you check this user controller, you see it has dependency in here. We are injecting the interface. So here we have to make a way that the interface also exists in the controller or the test before this can work. And that is the reason why we're introducing mocking. So what actually is mocking? To explain this simply, Mocking is a technique used in unit testing to simulate the behavior of complex objects or external systems that unit test or unit interact with. So by using mock objects, you can control the behavior of these dependencies, making it easier to test the unit in isolation. So example of this, you can see we are having the interface created, and now we are injecting the interface in here. Now this interface here gets connected to the repo, or that's the implementation, whereby we have a DB context injected in the implementation. So in order for us to test this, we don't want to actually hit a code straight to a database, but we rather want to create a fake instance of this interface so we can use it. So when creating this fake instance, we have to provide our own values for that. It is not going to database and it's not going to execute anything. We are creating a fake instance of this, and that is what you're going to be using to test. So for now, we are testing the controller. Now the motive of this is to check. Let's assume this method gives you the right record, the right result. Will this endpoint return what you want to return? That is the motive of it. So we are not much focused on this itself. That's the reason why you want to mock it. You want to create a fake one so we can use it and now bypass this one and now check if this endpoint is going to give us what is expected to retrieve or to give out. I hope this is clear. Good. So let's see. So we are not much focused on the actual work of the interface. We're going to create an instance of it, and now that's going to be the fake one, and we're going to specify our own values in it in all the methods that we have, the interfaces that we have. We're going to specify our own return type. You know, in our interfaces, we specify some of the return types as Boolean, others to as the entity, others to as an enumerable of the entity. So anytime that we mock this, we must provide the same return type which corresponds with the type that we have or we have specified against each interface. Okay, so let's go back to the controller. Now let's inject our interface that we created. Now in order to do that, it is quite simple. Let's first create a private read-only variable. Now this is going to hold the interface in there. You know, we can put everything in the constructor, or you can put everything in the scope. Let's say in the scope, in the function. Okay, but with this, since you're going to be using this often in all our CRUD testing, I want us to extract this in the constructor and now set the value to it as soon as this class gets called. Okay, so now we have this. Let's introduce the namespace, so control period, and now we need to add reference to this API project because that is where this interface is found. Now, whilst we have this set, the next thing we're going to do here is let's create constructor for this. So CTOR can get to constructor quickly, and in that we can specify by setting up our dependencies, and by doing that we can have a look at this. So this referring to this scope in here dot user interface, referring to this interface that we have created, is equal to, you see here we are using this fake it easy, using this package. We want to fake the instance of this interface. This is not the original one. We are faking it. So anytime that you call this, you have the fake instance in there, not the original. We store it in here, and as soon as the app loads in, the constructor is going to load for the first time when the app is, or when the class is being called up. We're going to have it set up in here and be waiting patiently for the others to get ready. Set, and then go on. So now that we have this set, the next thing we need to do here is we need to declare our SUT, S-U-T, and that stands for system under test. System under test is actually the section that you're going to test, and also it refers to the specific component or unit that is being tested. So in unit testing, the SUT is isolated from its dependencies to ensure that tests are focused on the behavior of the system under test itself. So we need to also define it in here. And what is the unit that we are testing in here? I believe you know this, isn't it? Good. I heard you say controller. That's a user controller. Exactly, that is it. So we need to also create an instance of this user controller. So in order to do that, let's create a variable to hold that. make it globally available in this context. So let's have it set up here. That's a user controller, and now you have the instance created. Aside from that, anytime the app loads in the constructor, get ready first, we want to set our system under test section. We want to put it in there. All these are going to get executed within the constructor, and this is going to get started as soon as the app starts. So maybe you can make a reference to this explicitly, making a reference to what we have in here. This is very simple. You can also remove this because we have only one instance injected, and absolutely it's going to be assigned to that. But well, let's put it there. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do here is I want us to create a fake user. You know, when you go to a interface, we're going to have a user in here. We're going to have, well, we're going to have a user, right? So this is going to return user. This is going to return, this is going to also take in user. This is going to take in user. You see that? So we can create a fake user. Everything is going to be fake, fake, fake. Not the original one. Fake, fake, fake. For testing, fake, fake, fake. Okay. So in controller, let's create a fake item. That's a model. So you can see we have static, and this is static. You can just put this in a class. Well, and I'll add it here. Since it's only one here, I can directly put it in here. So create fake user, and we're going to fake this entity. You create an instance. Now you can see defaultly, if I click on this user, it has go to definition. It has no default values. When we get to a certain point, you need to provide values to this. But for now, let's maintain that. So you can see we have our constructor injected, we have our dependencies, and our system under test also clarified in there, and they are waiting for us to use them. All right, so let's go and start our first test. And now, since you're going for a CRUD, we want to start first with the create. How do we create? How do we test the create? This is quite simple. Now, for the create, let me actually give this comment here to explain. This is create, and I believe you know that, and that is the CRUD create. That's the first C. This method returns created, and that is a success. So as soon as we have created, it means the operation is successful, was executed. As soon as you have bad request, it means something is going on and it failed. We are not much concerned with this bad request because you want to actually be optimistic. You want to focus on the success side. So we are testing our endpoint to make sure that they return success. Good. So now that we have this set, the first thing to do here is to implement our attribute on top of the class, and this is going to be the fact. So fact, actually, that's going to be the starting point. Okay, it's actually telling you that the debugger that yes, as soon as you want to run this test, this is the starting point. Now you can see we have a user controller. That is what I told you earlier on. Do you remember? We have the create, and that is a method, and there's a return creator. So that's a return type. So that's the naming convention for giving up your test names. Okay, now this is going to return nothing, so I decided to use it as void. And now here we have three patterns that we need to follow: arrange, act, and now assert. What is arrange? Arrange means what? Gathering all your use cases, gathering all the data that you'll be using or you will need to perform this. And now here I need only a fake user. So I create, this is the method, I create an instance of it, and now I store it in here. That's what I need. These are what you need. Now aside from that, we go to act. That is where you perform the actual action. So for the act, I used a dot call to, then I am just calling a fake instance of this. Take note, this is not the original, this is a fake instance. Now I have a method known as create async. This create async needs a T model. Now this T model here, it is in the form of user. So the fake user that I have created, I have to inject it in here. Everything is fake, right? Then this method going to return true. Check it out. From the interface, create returns true. So I have to specify the return type. Let's assume this returns true. So specify the true in here, type in here, returns true. And now here, since you want to return created at action, if we check the controller, if it is true here, you want to return created at action. So we need to typecast the response or the result from this interface to this created at action. So this is the response. This is a method create, and now the result that's going to come in here, you want to typecast it to created as action, and now you pass in the user model. This user model is also going to pass on to this fake instance to get it created, and I return this value in as true. Aside from that, we go to the assert. Now the assert here is simply assessing the result. Assess the result, validate the result. Now what are we validating? You know, this is going to return a status code, so we want to check this status code should be of 201, and 201, it is in the form of created. You know, 200 is okay, and now 201 here, it is created. So it is created. You can also specify status code dot created. You can do that, but let's simply put the 201 in here, making it very simple and short. And now the result should not be null as well. This is a very simple way of following. This is a pattern of creating a test for every controller. Okay, so now that we have this, we need to run. How do you run this? Let's say let's first save this, and for us to run this, all that you need to do here is go to our test, and for now we can go for run all test. Now if I click on run all test, it's going to run this test, and I have test explorer in here. How do I get this? Let me put the test explorer down here. Okay, now when you go to test, you're going to find test explorer in there, and you can click on it to get it shown. Now we have this is running, and boom, we have it. You can see we have it, and now you can see, check here, there's the outcome one pass. So this is working. If I click on this, you have only one method in this, and that is a create. Let me just expand this for you to see what is going on. That's a return created, so that's a create. Now if you want to, we can put breakpoint in here. You see, now from the controller to user controller, that's a create. Let's put breakpoint here so we can check when this method gets called with the fake instance. Well, now let's go back to the test, and now in here I can click on this, then go to debug, and now let's have a look. This point is going to get hit. We're going to step into one after the another. Oh, I said it. You are in here. Now click on this, step into the next one. So create fake instance. Now this is just an instance with the default T model that we created. That is a model, the user. It has everything as null. By well, let's move on. Now if I go to step the next one, we have this method called, and we're going to return true. So this fake instance has been issued, has been called, and now it has returned true in here. Now how do we rectify that? If I click on next, that is where we're going to hit on an actual endpoint. Now check the results. You see we have the true in here. Now we check if it is true, then what are going to do this one. So click on next, and we see this is going to get executed. Now after it is done, we're going to click on this step in again. Then we have the results. If I click on results, check it out. We have the status code of 201 that is created, and we want to extract the status code of 201 from it. It matches with the status code which is brought here. Now click on execute, continue, then continue. And now in here, if we go to our, you see we have the test pass. Hooray! So that's a simple way of testing your controller endpoint. Okay, now you have a lot of things to do. So we're going to create a next method to handle the, we're talking about create, read, update, and delete. So let's quickly finish this. So let me just minimize this. Now let's go to the next one. So with this is going to be for read all. Now with the read all, this method also going to return okay for success, and now not found for fail. So in that, we need to also specify our fact on top as a starting point, making sure this is rectified or this is seen as test. Now aside from that, we see we have user controller.get users. So this is getting all lists of users, and in that you want to return okay if everything work. Arrange, we have to create an instance or a list of T model, that's the user, because at the end when we execute this interface, you want to return list of users. So by doing that, you need to provide this. You have to create this list manually so we can insert into the fake and I'll make it return. Yes, so that's what we're doing in here. Now we see we add just one record or one instance to the list, and then under the act we call the interface get async, and then from the return we pass in the list. Aside from that, we typecast the results to OK because that's what we want from our even name in here. Then we check if it is OK to 200. If it is OK to 200, wow. If it is equal to 200 status code, then you want to do that. That is for read all. Now let's finish off so we can run them together. Aside from that, we go to the next one, and that is a read single. So that's a get user by ID. This returns the same thing, OK, and also not found. Now in that, there's slight change in here that I made, and here by introducing the theory attribute and the inline data. What do these guys, what do they do? Yeah, well, you know, we here from get user need to specify an ID. So there are two ways of doing that. You can either manually or specify the ID under the arrange. So you can say int ID equal to 1 and I'll specify the ID in there. Or you can also specify the ID as a parameter. Now when you do that, you know, this end is going to be a test. It's going to allow you to specify the ID. So you have to make this ID available. Where do you make it available? Inside the inline data. So I want to pass in the ID of 1. And in order for me to do this, I need to specify the theory attribute on top. This is going to work the same as the fact attribute. So when you do this, do not also add the fact. Add only the theory, and well, you're good to go. We create fake instance of this user. We populate it in here since it's going to return this T model, and that's going to be the user. We call it and I'll pass in the return type, and I retype the results to OK. And then we check the status code in here. If it corresponds to what we have, 200, OK, then return it. That is for the get. Now let's see, aside from read single, what can we do again? We can go in for the update, isn't it? Let's see how do you update it. This is quite simple. Now for the update, this method returns OK and also not found. Now you have the user controller underscore update, and at the return type yes OK. We create a fake instance of this. Since we're going to update it, we need an user here, or a T-model instance of this T-model of user as payload. So in order to do that, we need to create a fake instance. So you can see that the method that you created, we are using it often. Great. So that's the best way to do it. The often method that you do use, make sure you create it once and create an instance of it and start using them. Now we also make a call to this fake interface. Then you pass in the model and specify the return type. After the results, you want to typecast it to the type that we want as OK. Then you want to check if it's equal to 200. Give us the green light, and that's under the asset where we assess the content of the results. We have last one left, and that is delete. So for delete, what do you think will happen? Since you're going to specify an ID, you can use the theory or you can use the other method that I was talking about. Let me show you. So I've implemented all the two options in here. You can choose one for yourself, okay, and one for future use. So you can see we have in here, I use the same fact, and instead of I specify the parameter using the theory, no, or using the inline data, no, I not do that. I made explicitly here specified, and aside from that, we acted to specify the user ID, then typecast the results here as no content. And then you want to consider the status code by asserting or accessing the results. Yeah, so this is all that we need to do. Now, once you have this set, what's the next thing to do? We're going to run all these tests and see. So click on this and I run all tests and check it out. Now we wait, so you can see that waiting for build to complete. Now it has to build the project first, then you're going to start running all the endpoints that we have as our test. Then let's see, so the first one is done. You have a green light. Well, let's wait and see. Great. Yeah, as you see, outcome is 5 passed, and we have green light for all of them. So it tells you that the endpoint, the control that we have created is working perfectly, and the results that we specified is what we are getting. Exactly. So this is a simple way and a beautiful way of creating unit testing for controller. This is for controller. I would also prepare for another video for testing repositories and also maybe services using the HTTP client. Well, I'll try as much as possible to do that. So to summarize this, in this video, I have walked you through the essentials of unit testing web API controllers using the XUnit framework, Fake It Easy, and Fluent Assertion packages. We started by setting up our environment and writing our first test. Then we move on to more advanced topics like mocking dependencies and writing Fluent assertions. So at the end of this, I could see you have a solid understanding on how to write clean, maintainable unit tests that ensures your web API controllers are robust and reliable. Thank you for tuning in to this tutorial on Netcode-Hub channel. I hope you find it informative and engaging. Unit testing is a crucial part of modern software development, and with the tools we've covered today, you will be well equipped to write effective tests for your web API controllers. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out any of my future tutorials. Happy coding, and see you again.